to lock in, to become something that no government, a year from now, 5 years from now, 20 years from now, could ever go back on.
According to some very left-leaning politicians in Canada, there's been a little bit of a conspiracy brewing behind the scenes, that doesn't sound very democratic to me, to ensure that the Conservatives absolutely never have a majority mandate in this country. There's a lot to unpack with those statements alone. We have some new developments, breaking news coming out today about Trump tariffs and some other stuff going on in the country. The NDP has seemingly turned their back on Mark Carney, like the actual NDP party, not Jagmeet Singh and his camp, of course. I'm Jasmine Lane. This is Over Opinionated. Subscribe, like, share, comment your thoughts down below. And of course, give me a follow on other social media platforms as well. And if you aren't buckled up yet, you might want to be, because Donald Trump has officially driven Justin Trudeau to tears.
I put Canadians first, that I have people's backs. And that's why I'm here to tell you all that we got you. Even in the very last days of this government, we will not let Canadians down today and long into the future.
And in his final days, possibly his last act, wow, what weird timing this is. And boy, do I ever have a clip for you that's going to explain all of this and just punch you right in the gut coming up right away. Trudeau has announced that $37 billion in childcare deals with 11 provinces and territories have been signed. Agreements will increase base funding by 3% per year for 4 years, starting in 2027.
Because in the past few weeks, we've been working with our provincial and territorial partners to make sure that families can rely on this system, not just for years to come, but will allow this system to lock in, to become something that no government, a year from now, 5 years from now, 20 years from now, could ever go back on. And it's hard to do, because there is nothing one government can't do that can't be undone by the following government.
I mean, that's kind of what a lot of us are banking on in terms of all of the social programming that we just can't afford.
Unless Canadians are very clear on the need to keep this going. So we are going to make sure that more Canadians over the coming years understand that childcare is a foundational building block of what it means to be Canadian.
Social programs are a fundamental part of being Canadian. What does that really say about us? What a wild statement that is. And I'm not sitting here trying to poo-poo all over $10 a day daycare. Yes, it definitely helps some people. There's also some people who take advantage of it that maybe didn't need to. There's also waitlist problems. The average waitlist for childcare went from being, maybe 2 years, give or take in most cases, which worked out very well because, the first year of a baby being born, you're with them typically when it comes to maternity leave. And then, your second year, you go and you get back to work yourself. But now wait lists in some areas have exceeded 6 years. So by the time that you can even get in to a childcare facility, your child's already in school and you don't need it anymore. Like that, there's repercussions to all of these things, not to mention the extreme cost. Canada's in a $60+ billion deficit right now, and you just guaranteed $37 billion to ensure that childcare $10 a day remains. Really? I can see the benefits of the program. I've also seen the horror stories of people who can't get it now because the demand, everybody's just surging to it, and people who have had to close their doors of their childcare facilities because they can't survive off of the $10 a day amount, and then also off of whatever the provinces subsidize them. And there's been delays in those subsidy payments and whatnot. So bro, like there are so many other things you could have focused on here. And the Conservatives have also never outright said that they are absolutely going to be removing $10 a day daycare. So it's weird, this whole rhetoric that you're creating. And of course you're doing it on purpose, but it's just frustrating to listen to. And on that note of social programs, I came across this that I thought was so eye-opening. And yeah, these are things that many Canadians enjoy. When we happen to go to the hospital, it may not always be the greatest experience, but at least it's there and we don't have to pay for it. Well, you do pay for it, but not up front, right? And this was just a very interesting thing that I think more Canadians should pay attention to, especially in terms of Trump being so upset with Canada for how much we have just absolutely failed them in our own agreements.
The alternative is the rest of the world does not start carrying their fair share. The rest of the NATO nations, the alternative is they remain complete. For crying out loud, you had the Liberal Prime Minister debate. Effectively their primaries were the greatest promise from any of them was that they would finally meet their contractual obligation by 2032. So the alternative is to allow these nations to provide social benefits, social safety nets to all of their citizens at the cost of, let's be clear, the American worker. The American worker, not just the billionaire. A Canadian right now sitting in a suburb of Montreal is enjoying socialized healthcare because a middle-class American in Kansas is paying taxes. Is that clear enough?
So what he's getting at here is the fact that there are all of these things and agreements that world leaders have that protect us and that help us as partners in the globe, right? And that Canada's not the only one. Canada's pretty bad, though, has not been meeting their requirements. And so there's a lot of Americans out there who I'm sure they would love to have some of the great social programming that we do. However, their country is really the only one footing the bill for all of these other things that everybody is supposed to be contributing to. And he absolutely has a point there in that Canadians and other countries as well are sitting here and enjoying all of these government programs that we have because our government is not focusing their earnings in the ways that they should be. They are not doing what they said they were going to do. And so honestly, Justin Trudeau's announcement of, we've signed on over the course of the next 4 years, another $37 billion so you can have $10 a day daycare, I just feel is such a bad timed thing to do. Because there are these things that are very serious to our neighbors amidst this tariff situation. And you announcing that, while sure, it may get you some victory points in your own country, how does that look for the rest of the world who is seeing this and thinking, are you kidding me? So what? So now we don't get to do things like that because we're the only one taking these commitments seriously? And what happens if we stop taking those commitments seriously and we decide, yeah, you know what? We'd like to do the same thing for our people too. Well, then what? Does Russia invade? Does China invade? We have very serious threats that nobody except for the United States is actually taking seriously. And then you have our government announcing social programs to buy them some more votes, to make people more dependent on the government so that they can't think or do or experience life for themselves because they can't afford it, because they've been pushed into this hole. Like the welfare system in Canada and across all countries is horrendous. You just cannot get out of it. It is so hard to get out of it. You are so discouraged from ever getting out of it because the government, by all accounts, wants you to be dependent on them. Your dependency on them enables them to stay in power longer.
The single biggest threat to Canadian democracy comes from disinformation on social media. That's something in the hands of every party to decide they could renounce. So while it's generally seen, and I think it's a common wisdom, that if we're going to see a parliament that cooperates well together, it will be a minority parliament. And it will be a minority parliament where Liberals, Greens, NDP and Bloc have the majority of the seats, but not any one party able to form a majority government. That will instill in our parliament a spirit of cooperation. That means thinking about voting very differently.
What a brilliant example of how establishment elitist politicians are scared of the people, and to the point where in order to maintain control, they are willing to undermine democracy and to go and say that the biggest threat is disinformation. You're weaponizing the term disinformation again. And this has nothing to do with disinformation. This has absolutely everything to do with views and suppressing information that doesn't align with the ruling elite. Because the biggest threat to democracy is so unbelievably, laughably far from online speech. It is government overreach and censorship. And so what she did here is just confirmed many of our speculations already that the left cares so much more about holding on to power than respecting the choice of voters and respecting the opinions and views of voters. Demonizing online speech on social media, like she just did, like many other people who are very far left in this country have done, is just another way to control the narrative. And it's just these elitists who oversee us that believe that they have moral superiority to be able to define what is true and what is not, and that they think that they're more superior than the average voter, and that democracy only works when they win.
And for the president to, frankly, say those things about Justin Trudeau staying in power, that is obviously an attempt to needle Canadians, to needle the prime minister at a time when that kind of response is not very welcome here. And it is particularly not welcome at a time when it is true that the prime minister is leaving and we are moving into a different political climate.
Or could it be that Donald Trump is very anti-establishment? He may have a lot of money, a lot of investments. He may be a very notable figure, but he is not a fan of the governments, especially left-leaning governments and how they operate and treat their people. So I don't know that that's a needle he's trying to draw. I think that he is seeing the same things many Canadians are seeing and have been saying from day one, given the rhetoric that people like CBC like to push out about this whole trade and tariff war. Donald Trump posted again to Truth Social, and there's an interesting chain of events happening here because he says, I quote, "Believe it or not, despite the terrible job he's done for Canada, I think that Justin Trudeau is using the tariff problem, which he has largely caused, in order to run again for prime minister. So much fun to watch." And then minutes later, he says, "After speaking with President Claudia Sheinbaum of Mexico, I've agreed that Mexico will not be required to pay tariffs on anything that falls under USMCA agreement. This is on until April 2nd. I did this as an accommodation and out of respect for President Sheinbaum. Our relationship has been a very good one, and we are working hard together on the border, both in terms of stopping illegal aliens entering the United States and likewise stopping fentanyl. Thank you to President Sheinbaum for your hard work and cooperation." Hey there, it's Jasmine from the future. I'm in the middle of editing, so I don't particularly feel like readjusting all of my lighting and whatnot. Just a heads up, this just came out according to CBC, a couple of other sources. Trump has paused the tariffs on Canada as well as Mexico. So it says Trump White House pauses all USMCA compliant tariffs on Canada until April 2nd. So that is about 38% of Canada's exports to the United States. That is all. Look at the contrast there of Justin Trudeau and just what he thinks about him, and rightfully so. If you go back and think about all of the awful things and comparisons Trudeau's government has used in order to win, in order to fearmonger and manipulate their population.
Well, what I heard the president say today is that it's about border security and fentanyl. Now, I love the people of Canada. I don't have a lot of confidence in Mr. Trudeau. I wouldn't put him in charge of a ham sandwich. If I were Mr. Trudeau, I would take the fentanyl problem seriously. I would do more than he's been doing, and I would tighten up border security. But I've watched Prime Minister Trudeau through the years. He doesn't like President Trump. He's never liked President Trump. He made fun of President Trump in his first term. And, that's his right. But it's you never dig up more snakes than you can kill. And I think the Prime Minister has dug up more snakes than he can kill here. And
yeah, there may be a new Liberal leader in a couple of days here, but we are not at all going to be moving into a different political climate in the slightest. Every single one of them is involved. They are all strung together. They are all a part of the exact same team. It's like what Pierre Poilievre said a couple months back. They're just like Justin. Every single one of them is just like Justin. And watch this, the NDP have actually called out Mark Carney.
Which brings me to Mark Carney and Brookfield Asset Management, the person who has been touted as having the solutions to our economic challenges. And yet Mark Carney is very much the poster person for the broken system, the hollowing out of Canada that has made us so vulnerable today. Mark Carney has a clear track record of pushing for wealth accumulation for the rich at the expense of workers and Canadian communities. A 2023 report from the Centre for International Corporate Tax Accountability and Research called Brookfield Canada's top tax dodger. In 2021, Brookfield Asset Management dodged a jaw-dropping $6.5 billion all on its own, according to Canadians for Tax Fairness. In 2021 alone, Canada lost $30 billion in corporate tax revenue to offshore havens. This means that 1 in 5 of all the tax dollars corporations diverted from the Canadian public came from Brookfield alone. This is obscene, and Canadians are paying the price. Today, we in the NDP are calling on Mark Carney to come clean about his role in Brookfield's exploitative practices.
But you won't see CBC or other mainstream outlets questioning that or even sharing that news, nor will they share things like this of Mark Carney himself discussing how much he has enriched himself based on his lobbying, based on these tight-knit relationships that he has with the Liberal government of Canada, a government of which he has penetrated, even though he's unelected, even though he didn't live here, even though he holds multiple passports and describes himself as European, even though, by all accounts, this is the most undemocratic thing I've ever witnessed in our country's history.
Well, I do spend some time advising on what, again, pro bono, but advising on the types of policies that are going to have maximum impacts for investors. So I'll give you an example, which is one of the issues. It's not the biggest issue. It's like 2% of global emissions. You wouldn't know it from the headlines, but 2% of global emissions is for air travel, emissions from air travel. Now, so the question is, are we going to have green, sustainable aviation fuel? What's happened in the UK, the EU, is they've said to major airlines, look, if you're flying in and out of Heathrow or wherever, you have to have 10% of your load has to be sustainable aviation fuel by, I think it's 2030. Consequence of that policy has been to convert some entrepreneurs in Texas, in this case, a company called Infineon, to become economic. Because all of a sudden, American Airlines, British Airways need to buy that fuel. They'll pay a green premium. You've got an offtake, that's high credit quality, and so in that case, we Brookfield put $1 billion to work there, and it's a fantastic opportunity. The point being, without the policy, the policy has to drive it and drive things down. So yeah, I'm dodging your question.
So Mark Carney, pro bono, right? That's how he gets around this, and that's why he's not on government documents up until 2020 was the first time it was ever reported. Mark Carney has been advising policymakers about policies that will enrich his companies. That's what a lobbyist does. And we're about to have an unelected lobbyist, elitist, a globalist, be the prime minister of our country. And everybody's okay with that. according to comment sections, according to mainstream media. I'm Jasmine Lane. This is Over Opinionated. Subscribe, like, comment your thoughts down below. And I may have a little bit of a bombshell coming for you in the next couple of days. I'm wrapping up my research and my theory on these Trump tariffs and what is actually going on here that nobody is talking about. And I'm almost done. I've almost finalized it, and I'm very excited to share that with you so that you can kind of give your opinion on it as well. It might not make you very happy, by the way, but that's going to be coming up in the next couple of days. So stay tuned for that. And until then, I will talk to you tomorrow.